In the movie Civil War, it's made clear that the aberrant president, who is so bad that even California and Texas could team up to get rid of him, he was a third-term president. As we know, the Constitution of the United States bars anyone being elected president for more than 2 terms, so this stood as self-evident testimony to this president's anti-American, anti-democratic credentials. Meanwhile, in other news, second-term President Trump has said, not for the first time, he'd love to run again in 2028. And while he's saying that, Steve Bannon, Trump's former chief strategist, has declared that there is a plan, that he and others are working on a plan to circumvent the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution to secure Trump his third term. He said this: "At the appropriate time, we'll lay out what the plan is." This spoken in a suitably cryptic manner, beloved of all supervillains. But there is a plan. And it was only right and fair, he argued, since Donald Trump was, quote, "an instrument of divine will," which seems to be stretching the moving in mysterious ways clause to breaking point. But I digress. Bannon went on, Trump is going to be president in 28 and people ought to just get accommodated with that. Now, of course, the first step in trying to create some aberrant break with tradition is to get the broader population to accept it as possible, and then to accept it as likely and possibly even desirable. And look, you can argue it's not that much of a stretch. I mean, my country, the United Kingdom, has no term limits on being Prime Minister. If you can win 3 elections in a row, you can govern for 12 years in a row. Margaret Thatcher won 3 elections. Tony Blair did likewise. Both of them, of course, have become so unpopular by the time they got to the 10-year mark that their replacement was organised before the next election came around. Which is an important point, because it's a parliamentary system, not a presidential one. Maybe that's what makes the difference. But you could say Trump should be inspired instead by, say, Paul Biya, the president of Cameroon. He abolished term limits back in 2008, and he has just been re-elected once again, at the ripe old age of 92. His new term in office will keep him busy almost until he's hit the 100-year mark. But America decided it was going to be governed by a written constitution, and this clause is written there as plain as day. So it's not really the point as to whether it's reasonable or not for someone to be elected 3 times or more. It's more the point whether you're going to remain committed to the form of government you previously used to go on and on and on about holding to be sacred to the founding of your nation. Now, there's every possibility that all Trump is really doing is trolling his opponents. Nothing will drive them more crazy than the idea that he's going to run for a 3rd term. So he tells journalists, all poker-faced, that yes, he's going for it, and then just enjoys heartily seeing all the responses. But given the nature of the man, you have to believe it's only a joke, as long as it's really not possible. The minute that Trump believed that actually there was a way it could be done, assuming he's still in good health by the time that crunch moment comes, it's inconceivable he wouldn't want to carry on. He's joking in the way that the cat who gets outwitted by the mouse holds his head up and declares, I didn't want that mouse anyway. There's also the possibility that they all know that he can't do this. But, as well as trolling Democrats, the purpose is really to keep the congressional Republicans in line. Because if they believe there's a chance he will continue on, then at the very least it will be later into his 2nd and final term before he becomes the lame duck president and people stop listening to what he does or doesn't want to have happen. All of that's possible, but let's put it to one side. And let's for now also put to one side the speculation about what sort of arcane mechanism Steve Bannon, if he's serious, is actually envisaging. Let's assume there is one, and it can work, in the same way that half of what Trump does works. In other words, it's not supposed to work, but he does it, dares the establishment to stop him, and the establishment discovers that it doesn't dare. So, how is it going to play out? I'm guessing a lot less smoothly than his supporters think. Firstly, the decision is going to have to be taken very soon after the midterm elections. J.D. Vance will be seeing 2028 as his entry point. A host of others will be seeing it as their best opportunity to challenge him for the mantle of successor to Trump instead. Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, maybe even Pete Hegseth, no doubt some other even more fringe types. Now they will be in a real bind. Hard to succeed to ownership of a MAGA base if you've turned against the king himself. But equally, J.D. Vance may well conclude, and I think this would be rational, that 2028 is his likely best, maybe only shot. Because if Trump did another 4 years, the chances that he would turn against Vance before the end of that period, the chances that Trump would blow the operation up so badly that anyone associated with him could only lose next time, all of those chances become highly probable. So he wouldn't want this. Now, who's on his side? Well, Vance is supported by the hardcore tech bros, who see themselves as bringing in the new super artificial intelligence age, believe that niceties such as democracy are less important than them being empowered to bring that age in. They support Trump, in that he's giving full support to AI and to crypto, dismantling all the checks and balances on them, even as he's diving into crypto himself as the chief vehicle for his unprecedented enrichment, which is fine. But let's face it, they nevertheless believe he's an idiot. Yes, he's on their side, but he's also doing things like making it impossible for them to recruit the brightest talent globally. He's prone to radical policy shifts on a whim, including things that are unnecessary own goals and often unintentionally damage the tech firms, the tech bros as well. They'd rather have a smart, MAGA-minded alternative who speaks their language, can walk in a straight line and talk in complete sentences, follow a strategy, and they will see Vance as being that man. Now, Steve Bannon took against the tech bro end of the MAGA spectrum. He attacked Elon Musk, sees all those bros as the sort of elites that MAGA is supposed to be rooting out. So if Trump decided he was going to go on, and Bannon had concocted some viable but necessarily fragile vehicle for doing that, you could very easily see the MAGA movement splitting into its two halves, descending into a largely behind-the-scenes civil war. The tech firms with all their money and access to the various dark arts might be working furiously undercover to try to foil the constitutional coup that Trump is trying to bring about. And they'd be doing so in a hands-off approach, maintaining plausible deniability so as not to damage the standing of their preferred candidate. Bannon and others would probably see that taking place. They would be fighting back furiously, probably seeking to make the treachery visible to Trump and the core movement, to out them for what they are. Now, you might think all of that sounds like the plot for a somewhat over-the-top dystopian novel, which is a pretty good description of the world we live in right now. So, yes, Trump is an autocrat who is not competent, but who various competent people see as utterly essential as a tool for them. MAGA is definitively split into the core Trump personality cultists and the AI technocrats. We already saw the potential for that split when Trump and Elon Musk fell out. The split between those two sides is likely something they would have to manage in primaries for 2028, even if everyone fully accepted that Trump could not run again, so it was being treated as a normal election process. But if it starts to become seriously not normal, then a number of those who had their plans laid according to the old rules, they will be desperately trying to avoid losing their grip on the potential levers of power. It's hard to imagine there wouldn't be some sort of a split around that. And then add to that the question of Congress. Ignore for a moment the impact, whatever it may be, of the midterm elections. The question will also be how many members of Congress will be as docile and submissive to Trump in the second half of his term, especially if he's fighting to extend that unconstitutionally as they are right now. Because they may figure that by saying that Trump is going to go on, they will keep them more quiescent. It could well have the opposite effect. Trump has been able to project this extraordinary personal power as he has over the last 9 months because his party has let him. If the Republican Party had been, for example, the British Conservative Party, or indeed the British Labour Party, there is zero chance that a leader with his sights on expansive powers would be given licence just to get on with it. This is a moment of unusual compliance. At some point, that's going to break down enough that there won't be a majority for the norm-breaking things that Trump would want to do. Right now, it seems to me that if Trump wants MAGA to continue its journey of changing America into its preferred image, probably the thing he would do would be to stand down at the end of his term. I mean, look, there's a good chance he'll be old and knackered by then anyway. And use his influence to get his successor supported by the base and elected again by the country. That successor would likely be Vance. Vance would get large amounts of resources from billionaires, and by then Trump will also have succeeded in weighting the elections just that little bit more in MAGA's favour. That should really be the nightmare scenario for democratic decline, because you don't want Trump to turn out to have been the incompetent autocrat whose main role was to wipe out all the guardrails so that a competent autocrat could then emerge unimpeded. And it's not as though the Democrats currently seem to be in danger of putting up a competent fight back. When you're tempted to despair at the democratic decline of America, it's worth reflecting. This is likely the high point of Trump's time in office, or the low point, depending on your point of view. Right now, he's shocked his opponents with his far-reaching plans, the energy with which they're being implemented. Those opponents remain in turmoil, trying to process who they even are in this situation. He has stunned the world with his aggressive bullying, his ability to put himself at the centre of every issue and relationship core to the future, and everyone's currently giving him most of what he wants because short-term they see they have no choice. And yes, he's terrified his own party into slavish acquiescence. His control seems total, so they dare not stand against him. Except for Rand Paul, of course, there's always one. None of that lasts. The opposition will start to get organised. Because the threat is serious, it forces the opposition to become more serious as well. The world is giving Trump all the Nobel Peace Prize nominations he craves and all the other stuff, but they're starting to organise their trade and their security and everything else to make themselves less vulnerable to America, more able to push back in the future as that becomes a reality. And as Trump starts to suffer defeats, and as some of his mistakes have real consequences, and as MAGA splits keep exploding into full view, his own party will become more fractious, less inclined to give him what he wants. And Trump's temperamental inability to handle any of that pushback, it's not going to be pretty. Right now, all things are possible. But it does seem to me that the chances of the wagon coming entirely off the rails are enhanced, not diminished, should Donald Trump end up attempting to go for that third term.